You've probably heard of this when it was a prestige class. This is what it does. Starting at 3rd level, you have access to 2 cantrips and 2 1st level spell slots. Going up to 20th level, you will have access to 4th level spells. So, you get access to spells as someone with all of the benefits of a fighter at 3rd level. And you go all the way up to 4th level spells. If this doesn't bother you, it should. And let me tell you why it bothers me in case you're having trouble. What the Eldritch Knight essentially is a battle mage. The concept of the battle mage, by its very definition, is broken. Because what a battle mage is a mage who is equally adept, if not more so, at fighting in melee combat. They're basically armored mages. This is so far from the base concepts of tabletop gaming and pretty much every kind of class-based fantasy game I've played. Except for maybe Skyrim, which, you know, if we're drawing on Skyrim for class balance, something's wrong. But this is so far against every other fantasy game I've seen where plate armor, like heavily armored shit like that, you know, it's like church and state. You know, you have your martial guys and you have your spellcaster guys. The spellcaster guys wear toilet paper and, you know, crumble into jelly if you hit them. And the martial guys, the fighters, are fucking dreadnoughts, but couldn't find their way around a spell book if they had the wizard next to them telling them what everything meant. But no, you just have Eldritch Knights here now who can start chucking around spells at 3rd level. And they get all the bonuses that fighters do. They don't lose anything from the base fighter class to get this. They can just do it. That is a severe problem for me. And I don't think this archetype should exist at all. If you absolutely have to have this archetype, at minimum, you need to bump it up so that they don't get spells until 5th level. And, by extension, that they do not get 4th level spells at all. At all. Because as it is now, this is the spellcasting chart for... Oh, jeez, I don't know how well you guys are going to see this, but... This is the spellcasting chart for an Eldritch Knight. In the event that you weren't able to see that very clearly, starting at 19th level, they have access to 1 4th level spell slot. Does not do it for me at all. I am about as not big a fan of that as you could possibly be. And I think the real thing that breaks it for me is that you don't lose core fighter mechanics for this. You just, you know, you're a fighter, but you can cast spells almost with no penalties, really. I mean, you're never going to be as good as a wizard or even a secondary spellcaster like a paladin, but when we get to the paladins, you're actually pretty damn close, like here. Alright, so Eldritch Knights at 20th level have access to 4th level spells. You know what Rangers and Paladins get access to? The highest level they get access to? 5th level spells. And at 20th level, they get 2 5th level spell slots. Let's see here. They start getting access to spells at 2nd level. I'm kind of more okay with that, because Paladins in particular have always kind of been a secondary spellcasting class. And that makes sense to me, you know. But why would you bother playing a Paladin when you can just play an Eldritch Knight? It's stupid. But yeah, essentially if you look at the chart here, the Paladin gets access to spells 1 level earlier and reaches the same point that the Eldritch Knight does at 14th level. So that's about if you're looking at the end point, that's about a 6th level difference. Which I guess is somewhat significant, but there is just something in the whole point of, or in the whole idea of, you can become a battle mage with no penalties whatsoever. That just rankles me, and I'm just like, no, this is not right. This cannot be allowed. And I guess the iconic idea here is that the Eldritch Knight is kind of supposed to be a sword mage, because they get the same weapon bond feature that sword mages had. But you shouldn't be as good as every other fighter, and I guess they try to make up for that with the... Sorry about that, I had a little recording interrupt. But they try to make up for that with the other fighter archetypes, the other martial archetypes for fighters. I just don't think it's enough. Like, they don't lose anything of the core mechanics that make them fighters. Just making sure my recording doesn't freak out on me again. They don't lose anything for this other than the other martial archetypes, which that doesn't count as losing to me. I mean, if either this archetype shouldn't exist, or what they should do with it is either make it so you don't get access to spell slots until 5th level. Like, this is what I would do to it. I would make it so you don't get access to spell slots until 5th level. Until then, you have to live off of cantrips. That's it. And by doing that, you change it so that they don't get access to 4th level spells at all. And maybe that would kind of make the class irrelevant, but so what? Shouldn't exist at all, so why does it need to be relevant? I think probably my biggest problem with the Eldritch Knight class is that it seems to just kind of spit in the face of the pure spellcasting classes, particularly wizards, who Eldritch Knights draw from. Because wizards have their abilities because they spent years of their lives studying. But this chunkhead fighter comes along and goes adventuring for a little while, and then all of a sudden he's like, well, I can do burning hands, guys. Isn't that cool? You see that wizard over there who spent the first 20 years of his life learning this spell? Yeah. I learned it in 2 weeks. Aren't I cool? No, that's not how it works. You're spitting. You're spitting in the face of every wizard who's ever picked up a book and sat in a library. It's... I don't know, maybe it's the, like, nerd in me that just kind of rankles at the idea of... of the like, you know, you spend all your life trying to develop this technological supersuit, and then the jock, you know, lucks into being able to throw lightning bolts and invalidates everything you've ever done. Maybe that's what bothers me about it. But I think that class is just super broken. And I have to reserve final judgment on it. Like, I'm trying to leave an opening for final judgment once I've reviewed the spell rules. Because I've heard that the spells, cantrips in particular, are broken. And if that's the case, this is easily, far and away, the most broken class in the game. Because you're the best martial fighter, and you have spells. We're going to stop that right now. Doesn't work. Moving on, we have the monk. The monk archetypes are monastic traditions. I think I like these pretty well. You have the Way of the Open Hand, the Way of Shadow, and the Way of the Four Elements. Way of the Open Hand is your traditional monk. The Way of Shadow is basically a ninja, and I thought that one was really cool. The fact that we've kind of merged ninjas into monks. Because ninjas are always kind of more associated with rogues, but they make more sense as monks to me. So I like that. And then finally, you have the Way of the Four Elements, which is basically basically like your Goku or your Ryu from Street Fighter or something like that. They can throw fireballs and shit. So they basically have energy powers. And this doesn't bother me where Eldritch Knight does, because they do this differently. They don't give you spell slots. They give you elemental disciplines. And some of the disciplines give you the ability to cast spells, but they kind of gate that fairly effectively. Like, the stronger spells you can't cast until 17th level. In fact, I don't think you get access to any spells, really. Okay, you get access to Thunder Wave right off the bat. Is there anything else? Gust of Wind right off the bat. Burning Hands right off the bat. Burning Hands, unless it's been changed, is a first level spell. So I would presume everything else is. Either first or second. One of the two. But, I like the way they do it here. I like the way that they handle the merger of spellcasting qualities and the qualities of a more martial class like a monk. I think they do it well here. It doesn't seem broken to me. Whereas with the Eldritch Knight, I just look at that and I'm like, fuck no. Don't like it. Paladin, I already kind of explained their archetypes, the Sacred Oaths, so I won't really go through those again. Standard Paladin, Green Knight, Avenger. Rangers have Ranger archetypes, I believe. Yep. And they get two. They have the Hunter, which is kind of your... Okay, the Hunter is more like your standard Ranger. They can focus either on ranged attack, ranged combat, or melee combat. And then you have the Beastmaster, which is how you get the Companion, because that does not come as part of the base class. So, I like the Ranger archetypes. There's nothing bad I have to say about them. Sorry about that. We are still recording. And then you have Roguish archetypes. And they have 3 choices: the thief, the assassin, and another one I kind of have a problem with, the arcane trickster. Although I don't have as much of a problem with the arcane trickster, and I will tell you why once I get there. Thief, fairly standard. Thieves are much more skill focused, so much closer to perhaps your traditional 3.5/Pathfinder rogue. Assassins are the more combat-oriented, and they also have a lot of features that assist them with infiltration and disguise. So, you know, got nothing real bad to say about assassins. I've always liked them. They don't always make the most sense, because, generally speaking, assassins are evil. But when has that ever stopped players? Am I right? And then we have the Arcane Trickster. My problem with the Arcane Trickster is that they have the exact same construction spell-wise, except they actually get more cantrips than Eldritch Knights do. But they have the same spell build more or less as Eldritch Knights. Why doesn't it bother me as much? Well, for one, rogues are not the best martial fighters. Arguably. You could probably knock that, you could probably make your arguments for barbarians and rangers. It would be harder to make an argument for a rogue, because a rogue needs the proper group support to be a good martial fighter. At least in my opinion. But the reason that the Arcane Trickster doesn't bother me as much, this is actually something I forgot to mention from the Eldritch Knight, but the Eldritch Knight focuses on evocation and abjuration spells. If you don't know what those are, abjuration spells are defensive spells. Evocation spells are your offensive blaster spells. Those are basically arguably the two most useful kinds of spells. Especially for a fighter. Because what are you concerned with as a fighter? You're either concerned with, well, usually you're concerned with both of these, but you're either concerned with taking hits, which abjuration helps you do, or dealing damage, which evocation helps you do. So they basically get to focus, because what it says is basically their spell selection for most of their spell slots is limited to spells from those two schools. Well, why are you ever going to pick anything else? I mean, unless you're playing like some, non-standard fighter, then what are you going to want for your fighter spells? You're going to want shielding spells, abjuration, resistance spells, etc. And you're going to want damage spells, evocation. It just adds further to the brokenness of that class, that they think they're limiting it by saying that it only has access to the two spells that are most useful for fighters. So what does it even matter? I was gonna pick those anyway. Why are you restricting me? I was gonna pick those anyway. Idiot. Arcane Trickster does not bother me as much, because their spells, like the spell schools they focus on, are enchantment and illusion. And I don't have nearly as much of a problem with like a trick-oriented rogue. Because illusion, that's going to help you be sneaky, and what was the other one? And enchantment, You know, that's also something that helps you, like, deceive people. It's deception. It's deception and subterfuge. That's the whole point of the arcane trickster. It doesn't feel broken to me. Now, in terms of the mechanics, it's about as broken as the Eldritch Knight is, but it doesn't bother me as much because, one, rogues are not the martial fighters that fighters are. You know, the martial combatants that fighters are. I realize that's a bit confusing to say it that way. And the spells that they focus on, while those spells do help rogues, they don't help rogues in combat quite as much as the spells that Eldritch Knights focus on help fighters in combat. The Arcane Trickster's focus is a little more, you know, out of combat oriented, in my opinion. That doesn't bother me as much. Plus, they get a lot of really cool things, like their ultimate feature for that archetype is something called Spell Thief, which basically allows them to steal a spell that's cast on them from the caster, and then they can cast that spell. And the caster loses access to it for a certain length of time, which is just, that's awesome, as far as I'm concerned. Sorcerer. This is another one that I didn't really get much out of. They have two archetypes. For them, it's called Sorceress Origins. They have the Draconic Bloodline, so dragon sorcerers. In Pathfinder, you had all kinds of bloodlines. They really dumbed it down here and gave you one. And it is, of course, associated with dragons. I realize the game is Dungeons and Dragons, but there's other creatures in the world, you know. But they have the Draconic Bloodline, which basically it's basically a dragon disciple. Prestige class. And then you have Wild Magic, which is far and away to me the cooler of the two archetypes, because basically what Wild Magic does is it causes random effects. Like, you know, you use your magic and randomly stuff will happen. Like, let's read some of the stuff that can happen. The main thing, the crux of this class is something called Wild Magic Surge, which is rolled... Yeah, you randomly get Wild Magic Surges. Like, the DM rolls and sees if you get one. And when you do, you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table. Here's some of the things that can happen. On a 7 or an 8, you cast Fireball as a 3rd level spell centered on yourself. On a 35 to 36, roll a d10. Your age changes by a number of years equal to the roll. If the roll is odd, you get younger, minimum 1 year old. If the roll is even, you get older. A 47 to 48. A unicorn controlled by the DM appears in a space within 5 feet of you, then disappears 1 year later. 1 minute later, sorry. That would be a little broken, right? 67 to 68. You are frightened by the nearest creature until the end of your next turn. Oh, 55, 56. I missed this one. This one's a good one. 55 to 56. Your hair falls out, but grows back within 24 hours. Whoa. 79 to 80. Illusory butterflies and flower petals flutter in the air within 10 feet of you for the next minute. Isn't that cool? 87 to 88. You cast Fly on a random creature within 60 feet of you. Surprise! '93 to 94. Your size increases by one size category for the next minute. And this one's rather odd. 95 to 96. You and all creatures within 30 feet of you gain vulnerability to piercing damage for the next minute. Huh. I don't get it, but okay. And there's all kind of there's bad stuff, there's good stuff, there's stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. There's all kinds of stuff on here. So far and away, that is better than the Draconic Bloodline, which you get wings, you get Frightful Presence, you get a breath weapon, and you get resistance. Ooh, how impressive. Warlock has the otherworldly... Is that it? Yeah. Otherworldly Patron feature. Oh, they actually have... They kind of have two here, really. Because Warlocks also get Pact Boons. Which, are given to you by your otherworldly patron. Kind of the whole idea with Warlocks is that they made a deal with some sort of outside force, some sort of outsider. And, although it's not always an outsider, I think Fae, you can do it with Fae too, but they've made a deal with an outsider, and that's how they get their spells. Warlocks are really strange in this game, by the way. They have extremely limited spell slots. They get... The highest they go with their spell slots is 4. That's for spells where they can pick anything. And then the highest level their slots go is 5th. That is really strange. And the idea they present it as is that Warlocks are supposed to be slightly better than the other main spellcasters. The arcane ones, anyway. Like, of course, clerics are always going to be the best, martial spellcasters. But as far as the more arcane-ish oriented, although they don't appear to differentiate between divine and arcane in this game. But the more arcane style casters, Warlocks are supposed to be, of the 3, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard, Warlocks are supposed to be, of the 3, the best fighters, like the best martial combatants, but they get light armor and simple weapon proficiency. Whoopee. That just kind of, I don't know, the Warlock class kind of seems weak to me. But, their spells outside of those very, very limited spell slots are Eldritch Invocations. And to talk about those, I have to talk about otherworldly patrons. So let's talk about Pact Boon first. Pact Boon basically gives you the Pact of the Chain, Blade, or Tome. Chain gives you a familiar. You can get an Imp, Pseudo-Dragon, Quasit, or Sprite. So you kind of have one for each, I guess. Don't really have anything for one of these otherworldly patrons here, but oh well. Blade is basically a Hexblade. So you can be a Hexblade with Pact of the Blade. And then Tome is... Tome basically gives you cantrips. So, whoopee. And they sure know an awful lot of spells, but they get no spell slots. Unless those add up, but if that's the case, my god, they have way too many spell slots. So I don't think that's how that works. Warlocks are confusing. Let me just put it that way. Like, they look underpowered to me. Especially when you compare them to the other guys. And the Eldritch Knight. Anyway, otherworldly patrons. You have the Archfey, and basically what every otherworldly patron expands your spell list for 1st to 5th level. Wait a minute, hold on. Okay, into the class description. So it's like even past this. Gotcha. Alright. Sorry about that. Moving on. So you have the Archfey, and they give you various bonuses. And pretty much what the thing that all of them do is they give you an expanded spell list. And then beyond that, their bonuses kind of vary. But you have the Archfey, so you have Fey Warlocks there. You have the Fiend, so like a devil or a demon. So that's your Dark Warlock, I guess. And you have the Great Old One, which is Cthulhu or a reasonable facsimile. So you have your Crazy Aberrant Warlock. Or your Cultist, as it were. I kind of almost get the sense that the Warlock is designed more as an NPC class than anything else, because they're so strange. Their spells are so weird. But, that's your archetypes. I think my favorite's probably the Great Old One, actually, because you can get yourself a thrall. You can become a Mind Flayer, basically, which is pretty sweet. But then you have your Eldritch Invocations. And most, but not all, of these give you spells you can cast at will. Like, for instance, Ascendant Step. You have to be 9th level for this. And you can cast Levitate on yourself at will. Let's see. Disguise Self, Alter Self, Silent Image, Slow. Most of these spells do not look like they are above 5th level, though, so... God, that is so strange. That Warlocks have been relegated to not only the role of a secondary caster, but... Alright, let me look at this, because this is really confusing me. All of your spell slots are the same level. You regain spell slots when you finish a short or long rest. I believe... Now, you would think spell slots are only recovered on long rest, but I think they've changed that for pretty much everybody. Let me see if they changed it for... Oh! Oh! It makes sense now. Sorcerer. You regain all expended spell slots when you finish a long rest. Warlock. You regain all expended spell slots when you finish a short or long rest. So, I guess that kind of means Warlocks are, like, their spell selection's certainly way more limited, but, or is it? They know as many spells as a friggin' sorcerer does. What about wizards? They know as many as wizards. Oh. Like base, because of course wizards usually know a lot more than their base. Oh, it doesn't say. That's right, because they get a certain number per level. Well, I think wizards still end up knowing more, but... That's... Okay, so Warlocks are not as broken as I thought. If they get spells back that often, they're just... It's just, It's less that warlocks are broken. They've been demoted to secondary casters, which I don't know how you might feel about that. You know, in 3.5, secondary casters pretty much capped out at 4th level. Pathfinder muddies the waters a little bit because you have a lot of Pathfinder classes that can get to 6th level spells, essentially. I believe the Magus and the Alchemist, if you count extracts as spells, which I do. They cap out at 6th level. Most of your spellcasters cap out at 9th. I don't know why we felt the need to bump up the cap out for the secondary casters to 5th rather than 4th. But I don't know, I'd have to see how it plays. At face value, I don't really like it because it cheapens the full primary spellcasters, in my opinion. But again, I have to see how it plays. Maybe it plays better that way. Maybe it's balanced. It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it could be to me, but maybe the other changes balance it out. I don't know. Anyway, that's why I thought warlocks were so weird, because they get at 20th, starting at what level start at? At 17th level, starting at 17th level, warlocks have 4 spell slots. That's it. First they have 1, and then they get a second one when they get to 2nd level, and then they don't get another spell slot until 11th level after that. So their spells are extremely limited. Extremely limited. Their selection is just nothing, but they recharge way faster. So I guess the idea is you pick a spell and you go. So it's almost like how sorcerers were in 3.5. You really kind of had to specialize in a spell or small set of spells. Kind of seems like what they did to warlock. I don't know did they change. All right, let me compare. I'm going to compare the sorcerer spell slots and the wizard spell slots. Exactly the same. Huh. I guess the only real difference is wizards probably know more spells. Maybe they were always the same. I don't know. But that's warlocks. So warlocks are really strange. Real strange. I don't get them, but I guess I don't have to. Okay, we are still recording. Just checking. And then we have our last class, the wizard. Wizards are, I don't know, pretty cool, I guess. You know, it's a wizard. It's about what you would expect from a wizard. Their stuff is, like, their archetype is arcane tradition. Kind of works like domains, but it's spell schools. It's spell schools. That's pretty much what it is. So they get 8 different spell schools they can choose, and the way that wizards work, you don't have it anymore where you have opposition schools, which are harder for you to add to your spell slots to prepare. Harder to prepare. And you don't get bonus spells. The way that they did that now is that, like Abjuration School, for instance. Abjuration Savant. Beginning when you select this school at 2nd level, so you get it at 2nd level, the golden time you must spend to copy an abjuration spell into your spellbook is halved. So if you want to learn an abjuration spell, it's faster and cheaper than it is for everybody else if you are in the abjuration school. Everything else is kind of bonuses based off of the use of abjuration spells. Or, depending on what school you're dealing with, the use of the spells in question. I kind of like the specialty school approach, where you get bonus spell slots, or you have to spend extra spell slots to learn schools that you are in opposition to. So I'm not a big fan of that change. In particular, this Savant thing, which every spell school gets. This Savant thing seems almost useless to me. Because what is the benefit here? You don't have to spend as much money to put a spell in your book when the cost for it is already kind of negligible, I think. Let me see if they changed that. Copying a spell into the book. For each level of the spell, a process takes 2 hours and costs 50 gold pieces. So, a 7th level spell... Well, actually, 7th level is kind of expensive. And the math doesn't work real well. 6th level spell would be 300 gold pieces, if I'm doing my math right, and 12 hours. That's like a day. That's not even a day. Like, you could do that and then do something else for 4 hours out of that day. And the money? 300 gold pieces? Unless they really change the economy, that's nothing. 300 gold pieces is almost... 300 gold pieces is trivial to an adventurer who is high enough to cast 6th level spells, which... Let's see here. 6th level spell slots open up at 11th level. 300 is nothing to an 11th level character, unless they change the economy. So, what is the point of this Savant thing? To me, there is none. It's just, them, you know, one of the ways that they felt they could put the power back in the player's hands. Or maybe it was a change made for simplification, because, sorry, I had an itch. Maybe it was a change made for simplification, because that is one of the big points of this system I'm starting to see, is they want everything simplified, and one of the big ways that they did that is, I think I'm really going to be able to tell you guys how simplified it's been once I start reading the how to play section. Because I haven't been able to confirm this because I haven't read that section yet, but it appears that you get an action and a bonus action if you have one available to take. And that's it. In your turn, that's what you get. There's no more moves or standards or minors. You get an action. And you might get a bonus action, which I guess the Pathfinder equivalent would be a free action, or a swift action. Probably more like a swift action, but I don't know. Maybe more like a free action. I don't know. Either way, like, it's swift action in the sense that you have to be able to, like, there's not like a universal thing that can be done as a swift action. There are, but they're obscure. It's kind of more something you have to get from a class feature. That's kind of how bonus actions work. There are class features in here which will allow you to do things as bonus actions. So I think that's part of the reason they did this whole Savant thing, but I still look at it and I'm like, you are the most useless thing. I think what I would probably do is, you know, if we're not going to introduce opposition schools, I would probably either give you some kind of bonus to your save DCs for that school in that place, or I'm tempted to make changes to the spell slot allotment, but I do wonder if that would unbalance things a little bit. Making sure I'm still recording. So that's how the wizard works. And the wizard has 8 schools. Abjuration, which is protection spells. Conjuration, which is spells that summon or create things. It also apparently has to do with teleportation. I guess that makes sense. Divination, which is like foretelling the future, being able to see things, stuff like that. Being able to see things you don't normally see is what I'm getting at there. Enchantment, which is like charming and deceiving people. Evocation, which are your blaster spells, particularly those that have to do with elemental effects. Illusion, which that's deception in another, probably more prominent way. Necromancy should be fairly self-explanatory, you know. Manipulation and rising of the dead. And transmutation, which has to do with turning things into other things. Or polymorphing things. You actually get the spell polymorph to where you can cast it without a spell slot as the penultimate thing you get from that school. And that is your classes. So, best worst from each group. I think my favorite race is probably... Race is a little harder to answer. I know what my least favorite is. My least favorite is the Dragonborn. Just because I don't get what they're doing here. It's a bit of overexposure to dragon-related things in Dungeons and Dragons. I know that might seem silly, but I don't care. I guess I would probably have to say gnomes. I like pretty much all of the races, even the Dragonborn to an extent. You know, there's not a whole lot not to like. I would probably say either gnomes or tieflings is my favorite race. I most enjoy the things that they do with those races. And my least favorite would be the Dragonborn, just because, for the simple fact of, you know, if we needed another monstrous race, why couldn't we do something reptilian, but not related to dragons? Make like lizard men, you know? Lizard folk. Give us lizard folk. It's probably just me, though. I'm sure everybody else loves playing dragons. They can keep it. Classes, best worst. Best, Paladin, easily. I love pretty much all 3 of the Paladin archetypes. And my favorite archetype in the book would have to be the Oath of the Ancients. So, I would say Paladin is my favorite class overall. Least favorite, Fighter. Least favorite archetype, Eldritch Knight. Don't understand why it's in there. Think it is entirely broken. Would chuck it out the door if I could. If it wouldn't unbalance the game. Which is kind of what I'm worried about it doing, because if you remove Eldritch Knight, then the Fighter options seem too samey to me. And maybe that's kind of always the curse of the Fighter, is to be kind of boring and middle of the road. But that's what a Fighter is. A Fighter is not this chunkhead who lucks his way into spells. No. Eldritch Knight, it's bad. It's bad and it shouldn't exist. If it has to exist, it should be changed. And then as far as the archetypes for the other classes, Barbarian, I don't really have a preference one way or the other. If I had to choose, I'd probably say Berserker, just because I like them. I've always liked them conceptually more. Bards, I would say College of Valor. I like Scalds. Scalds are good. Clerics, I I guess I should go through what the cleric domains are, shouldn't I? Knowledge, life, light, nature, tempest, trickery, war. What is it good for? And that's it. And much like the Warlock's patron stuff, each domain gives you access to special spells, and I think I already covered that. They give you special spells, and they give you channel divinity options, and then from there it kind of varies. But those are the names of the domains. And pretty much, you know, you have to pigeonhole all the deities. You have to pigeonhole all the deities from there. Druid. I have to say Druid's probably my second least favorite, next to the Fighter. Just because the Druidic circles are really boring to me, and they don't do a whole lot for me. I'm just kind of like, it's World of Warcraft, oh boy. For the most part, I think I rather like the Fighter. It's just that Eldritch Knight archetype kind of spoils the whole class for me. Because I look at that and I'm like, what fighter's not going to go Eldritch Knight? They're all going to pick the Eldritch Knight because it's the most broken one. Makes me mad. But if I had to pick a favorite archetype, it'd probably be Battlemaster. Or Champion, really. Anything's better than Eldritch Knight. Monk. Favorite archetype. Probably Way of Shadow. I like the ninja concept. I like the fact that the ninja has been rolled into the monk. Paladin, we covered him. He's my favorite. Ranger. Probably Beastmaster. I like animal companions. Hunter's fine. I don't see anything wrong with it. I like the features you get from being a hunter, but I think I just like beast companions a little bit more. Rogue. I would probably say my favorite in the Rogue is the Thief. I like the Thief. Although I probably like the Assassin just as much, so. Anything that's not Arcane Trickster, although I rather like Arcane Trickster too. You know, there's not a whole lot of archetypes I don't like. There's ones I like more, and there's ones that I think are closer to perfect in their execution. The Paladin comes to mind. I don't believe I said what I would, gun to my head, what I would pick for the Druid, so. Gun to my head, I would probably pick the Circle of the Land Druid, just because it's a more traditional Druid. You know, I don't even know if they get Wild Shape. I think they still do. But I'm not going back and looking, because I don't care enough. Sorcerer. Don't really care for the Draconic Bloodline very much. I like Wild Magic a lot. Warlock, probably say Great Old One is my favorite patron. And I don't really have a preference on the pack boons. They all do different things, so it kind of depends on what you want it for. But I think my favorite of the archetypes for the Warlock is definitely the Great Old One. Just because I like the idea of a cultist Warlock, and I can definitely see the Warlock being a very popular NPC class, particularly for villains. And then Wizard, favorite school. There was one I really liked. What was it? Wasn't that? Okay, there's actually two wizard schools that I really like. The last two, Necromancy and Transmutation. Necromancy basically gives you Animate Dead for free at 6th level. It does not say that... Okay, it buffs your undead. So it looks like it still takes a spell slot, but your undead gets stronger. So it's kind of like having stronger summoned creatures. It really reminds me of the Diablo 2 Necromancer. And I appreciate that a lot. And then the School of Transmutation basically allows you to make a Philosopher's Stone. So transmuters are close to alchemists. And I am a big fan of the fact that you can make a Philosopher's Stone. If I had to pick between the two, I'd probably pick Transmutation just because you get that Philosopher's Stone. I think that's really cool flavor-wise. Yeah, as far as my favorites, they don't really focus on mechanics so much, although a lot of the favorites do have really good mechanics. To be my favorite, you need to be flavor first. That's kind of the reason I dislike the Druid so much, is I think the Druid is probably the weakest of all of them on flavor. So, that is Dungeons and Dragons. Player's Handbook. Races and classes. I will be back with a new video sometime maybe this month, maybe very late this month. Depends on how long it takes me to read the second section of part 1 here. That'll probably be a very short video. This one might be rather long. Yeah, we're coming up on 2 hours. So, for the most part, I don't have a problem with the stuff that I'm looking at there. I can't really comment on any of the mechanical stuff until I'm just making sure my recording doesn't crap out on me. I can't really comment on any of the mechanical stuff until I read the How to Play section. I'll probably revisit these to an extent once I've done that and just be like, okay, this is mechanically good. Okay, this is mechanically stupid. And stuff like that. But those are general first impressions of the classes and races, guys. I hope you appreciate, and I hope you appreciate the video and, the thoughts. And I look forward to seeing what you guys think in the comments, especially if you've gotten the book yourself. If you've gotten this yourself, I would very much like to hear what you think about it and what you think about the races and classes. Maybe you've gotten further than I have. That's entirely possible. I am a very slow reader. So, if you've got it, or even if you don't, let me know what you thought. And I will talk to you guys later.